There's been a pretty massive change in the polling on California, although you would not necessarily know that just by looking at the headlines. Headline on the LA Times earlier today said, Warren and Biden lose ground in California's shifting 2020 Democratic race. Oh, I see, so they lost a little bit of support, so they're still in first and second, right? No, let's take a look at the actual polling. Bernie Sanders is now up 2 points over Elizabeth Warren, taking first in California, which is important for a number of different reasons, not least of which is that it has by far the most delegates out of any state in the entire country. Now, to be fair, they eventually changed their headline to be something like Warren and Biden lose ground, Sanders moves ahead. But it's not what they would, like if it was Buttigieg, the headline would be Pete Buttigieg first in California. That's just what it would be.
And it's not like Bernie Sanders putting his name in a headline drives traffic to your article or anything like that. Yeah, you wanna include the stalwart of online support, Joe Biden, to make sure everyone clicks.
Exactly. But there is a little bit more in that I wanna get to. So let's go back to that polling result graphic. And you're gonna see that Bernie is now up by 2 points, by the way, rising since June when he was at 17%, and he is again at first. Elizabeth Warren is close, by the way, and in this sort of state level poll, 2%, that's a wash. But Joe Biden is a good chunk down. Pete Buttigieg has shot up to almost tying Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, who during the time when they were doing this poll was still running, was at 7% in her own state.
Which must have informed her decision, and some of the people who were dissecting this said that basically an embarrassment in California was one of the major reasons that she chose to drop out early.
Exactly.
Although, she could have burned more time, gone to the December debate, which she qualified for, but I guess saving face was the primary objective, even though the California primary is a few months away.
Exactly, and so what I think is important about this is we're all, not all, I will say I am, and a lot of people are looking at the first 4 states. Generally, the first 2 especially, Iowa, New Hampshire, what's gonna happen there? How might that affect the later states? Then you have South Carolina and Nevada. Those are important too. And the people who are leading in those 3rd and 4th states, generally different than 1st and 2nd. Pete Buttigieg is doing really well in Iowa, but once you get into South Carolina, I don't even know if his name is on that list. And so that's important, but the thing is, California used to be way later in the cycle. Now it's been pushed up, it's gonna be part of Super Tuesday. And so even if, like let's say Bernie does well in Iowa, New Hampshire, which is generally expected that he'll do pretty well, and then maybe stumbles in South Carolina. If he has a big showing in California, that's not just getting first, that's potentially getting a big chunk of delegates.
Yeah, California is massive for him. And I do think, look, he's gonna do well in Iowa and New Hampshire. I can't foresee a situation where he's, like at minimum, he'll be in 3rd. At minimum. I mean, those states, specifically New Hampshire, where he won in 2016, and it was very important to his candidacy. I can't foresee a situation where he won't do well, and that sets him up very well going into that now even Super Tuesday, which is going to be significant.
Yeah, and by the way, this is just a quick note because we're gonna talk a lot more about this next year, but I wanna make sure that, especially if this is the first primary that you've been really following on a day-to-day basis, the way that the primary is done on the Democratic side is different than the Republican side, and it's very important how it's different in that the Democratic states their delegates are allocated on a proportional basis. There are some in the Republican side, but the Republicans have a lot of winner-take-all states, which means that if you win a state, even by just a little bit, it's a big chunk of delegates that you get, and maybe nobody else gets any. What happened in the 2016 race was that Bernie did really well in the early states, had a really rough Super Tuesday, and that put him in the hole in a way that was always going to be very difficult to catch up on. It meant that even if he were to win states, it might only gain him a few net delegates each time. And the more that are allocated, the more you have to win the later ones by to catch up. So bear that in mind as we go into this. A lot of people, I think grifters strung people along implying that the rules were different than they are, but that's why it's important to get out ahead early, okay? And to win big. You can't just win. It matters how much you win by.
Yes, exactly. And the fact that he didn't do well on Super Tuesday just gave the media an extra excuse to pile on and say that the lead was insurmountable, even as he gained name recognition as it came along, because Super Tuesday happened so early in the primary process. Now that California's been added to it, it's even more important to get out to an early lead. And additionally, back in 2016, they were adding super delegates. The count, those aren't voted on later. The media media was adding them on top to make it seem like Sanders, it was like he was down by 900 when it wasn't even the reality. The superdelegates vote later. So just something to keep in mind. Yes, a lot of this primary is going to be determined, and the tone that's going to be set is going to be determined quite early on, and California is going to matter a ton. So that's just something that we need to keep in mind. And then just also quickly about Elizabeth Warren, her drop is substantial.
Yeah, I mean, she
not
was
just
up.
In California, but nationally. Although nationally,
she had a big lead.
She did nationally. Let's last thing about that. It's all going to be affected by Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. Like the national polls don't mean much. Like Biden's leading, but he's not. I don't think he's going to win Iowa. I don't think he's going to win New Hampshire. He might win South Carolina. What is the next state that is a surefire for him to win?
A surefire. I mean, I would have to look.
But I don't think any. I can't think of one.
Yeah.
So just keeping that in mind about his national lead, not to get complacent, but national polls mean little because the wins shift the national polls, and really where it all matters is actually Iowa, New Hampshire.
And bear in mind, if it's close after that initial set, then how much money you have to go in last minute, open up a whole bunch of campaign offices, run a bunch of ads is gonna be really important. And we know that for Joe Biden, a guy who doesn't seem set to take off in the beginning, his fundraising went down a ton in the fourth quarter. That is not where you want to be.
Because his donors have maxed out. When you only go to rich people, they can only legally donate a certain amount. That's why he's expanded and said, now I will accept super PAC money. When you run a grassroots campaign like Warren and like Sanders and like Warren to a lesser extent, but still very grassroots, they can tap in to small dollar donors who haven't maxed out because they're giving $10, $25 throughout the primary process, and that's a huge advantage to them. So not only does it help with their integrity and their perception with the voters and the fact that they're uncorrupted, but it also helps strategically.
Yeah. For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.